Hey guys, welcome to Malibu, California. This fine, foggy, 60-ish July, middle of summer, Saturday morning. I am going to talk to you today about this guitar. It's not a thick hollow body arch top. It looks like some of my guitars, and in fact, at one point, this guitar was ready to go out the door to Mississippi. Look at that 1940s peanut can thing here. Anyway, this guitar suffered a little injury. The neck broke off at the headstock. Now you're looking at this going, well, it looks like it's still there. Well, I made a repair on it and I used splints and I wasn't happy with the way it turned out. And so I've decided we're going to use a method that I saw Ted Woodford out of Canada. I'm going to give you the link up here. It's kind of like I'll come up with a few things that appear to be my idea, like the scarf joint, a jig for the chop saw. Remember that one? Yeah, straight out of Darren Duke's right there. But what you're going to see me do is a modification of something Ted Woodford Ted Woodford did in Canada. And I'm going to give you a link to that right up here. So if it works, thank him. If not, blame me for not doing it the way he would have done it. Now, why am I putting this effort into this thing? Well, this, my friends, was the last guitar that my daughter Tammy signed. And that makes it really significant now that she's gone. So it was going to Cody Harrell. It's still going to Cody Harrell. But we're going to do something to the neck to make sure it stays on here. And then we're going to go down the path and get it down to North Mississippi along with that guitar that I'm building. Is my screen dirty or is that just my old man eyes? Anyway, there's a pair of guitars going down to North Mississippi. Cody is touring and playing bass with Cedric Burnside right now. So there's a couple of different-ish, not my usual thick-bodied, heavy-bodied feedback monster guitar. So let's get to the bench and I will show you step by step how this is done. And if it screws up, you're going to see it live. All right, guys, let's start here. This is the last headstock that Tammy signed, and it is on the guitar you saw in the opening. We've got Ruben Lacey, Sun House, Alan Wilson, Triangle of Love here. But unfortunately, we had a little accident and the headstock broke off. It had been glued and splinted before, but now what's going to happen is we are going to virtually replace by identifying where the truss rod is. We're going to come off of that a millimeter or two, and we're basically going to remove all of this here. We're going to glue a new piece in. We're going to let that sit. We're going to go to the other side and do the same thing. Let that sit. Then we're going to carve those new pieces of wood into matching this. And then finally, when all that is done, we are going to route down without hitting the truss rod something here and put a piece of wood in there that puts these two together. Kind of like when you're doing 2x4s on a house wall, if you don't put something in between, the walls will tend to rack or move this way. Rack, really? Regular people. Anyway, this middle piece here will serve to stop these from racking and twisting, and then it will all be carved down, and it will look like a knee brace. And I've talked to Cody Harrell, who this guitar was built for, and he wants all of the repairs to be open where you can see it. It'll be part of the character of the guitar. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the tuners. We are going to protect this with some saran wrap. No rubber band, just a saran wrap, because we're going to put our routing jig, which will sit right there, and we're going to have to clamp this here and here to stabilize it. We don't want to make it too tight or it will collapse the scarf joint. But anyway, this will be our guide, so we can take our router with its guide on it and slowly cut down into here like so. Now let's watch this happen. It's either going to be awesome or it ain't. Magnet, bright lights, baby, gonna. Okay, so the way this works is you get everything set with your router bit, and then you can put a piece of tape on it to kind of tell you where your first pass is going to be. You can see that pinstriping tape right there, and there's a little bit more sticking up now, which means I have adjusted it to where I know where it needs to be, because this is angled, so it's going to be thicker up here or down here on the neck and thinner as we go up the headstock, because this is like this. So now I'm going to take the part of this that adjusts, and I always set this part right here. It's got this wheel that moves back and forth, and I'm going to move it all the way up to the top, and then I'm going to tighten this like so, and then this part will sit on this here. And you want to make sure that when you put your clamps on, that there's nothing going to get in the way. And we know that because things spin around, that in the corners are going to be rounded. We're going to have to take that up in whatever we use to splice this. But I'm getting dangerously close, so let's watch this. There we go. I don't know if you can see this or not, but here's the top of the neck at the scarf joint, and it curves right here. And now we have this part right here that's cut out about that deep, and we're going to put a piece of wood in here, and it'll be like a biscuit. It will come out to here. We'll round the edges off and fit that in there, and then we're just simply going to glue that on, and we can tell that as we take this off now. I want you to see that I've used a piece of leather up here to protect everything. I have put a piece of backer board underneath the headstock and the neck, so the action of this doesn't just flip this over. And then I'd put something on with a piece of leather. Let me zoom out a little bit. A piece of leather here, and then I'm simply going to make sure that the red part up here is up when I flip this over. We don't want to change these around and be confused as to where they are, but as I take this off, you can tell we didn't hit the truss rod pocket. Where the truss rod is going to be here. Now this part over here will be glued into place. It will augment the biscuit that we put in there, and it will be done on the other side. There's going to be a lot of basically forming the neck here and making that okay, but we want to make sure that these don't happen at the same time, because we are virtually, in essence, replacing all the wood in the area of the brake substantially this way and this way without the guitar knowing we're doing it, which will include, while we're here, coming down about this much for that spot that will make it look like a knee brace or an H. I'm going to be so glad that this guitar is going back into action. Okay, I have a piece of maple here. It's about thick enough and wide enough if you use your head. So let me see here. I've taken the love pencil, which is very important, and I have marked off where this end needs to be running along this plane. I have marked off where the part that fits in here, the biscuit, needs to be, and I have kind of estimated where the rounding off needs to happen. So I'm going to take this to a bandsaw. I'm going to cut this section and this section, which may leave me enough for the other side. Imagine that, if I cut it right. I'm not going to want to use different kinds of wood here and there. I might use something different up in here, but we'll see. Okay guys, we got our sanding block here, which is good. We're just going along and doing some fine tuning. We've got a piece of sandpaper here that we can go along the edge on the inside here, and we have this done, and you can see that it drops right in there. There's a little gap right here that we can basically get rid of by pivoting this way, and this is kind of counterintuitive, but in order to make all that line up, I'm going to take a little bit off right up there. That'll let this come in, and everything will be where it needs to be. What we don't want is there to be any slop anywhere, or having to use glue as filler or putty. Ooh, that looks good. Okay, so there is going to be a little bit sticking up right here, so we can take the love pencil and do that. We can also come in at the bottom, which I've done. So there's going to be that much to carve off once it's glued in, and on the bottom where this comes in, that looks like that. I can get rid of this by cutting out that line to the outside of it on the belt sander, or I mean on the bandsaw, and then we can have everything ready to go. I do want to leave a little bit out here to clamp on and do all that, but this is kind of the idea. Now you want to remember this headstock is broken off, so we're getting all excited about doing this and flexing this back and forth. You're going to want to make sure that you don't flex this and break it. Okay, there we go. Oh, by the way, yeah, this is where your thumb drops into the 12th fret, which is a 1927 nickel, which is the year that the Great Mississippi Flood happened, when the levee breaks. All right, we have taken the marks we've made with the love pencil, some of those curves, and got this down to within a tolerance of 1 millimeter or 2. So this drops right down into here, and it's going to minimize the amount of rasping and all that we have to do to get this curved down. But it's time to glue this one on and make sure that we leave it alone. We're not using hide glue. This is meant to stay where it needs to be for eternity. All right, guys, welcome to the next morning. This actually took, and it's good. I'm going to do the other side now, and that happens by remembering that this was the side that we put here and we lined up with the tape marks. There are tape marks over here as well. But before I do any of that, I need to make sure that this is flat. So remember, this was here, so you just flip this over, line everything up like so, and clamp it down like we did before. But to make sure that nothing gets in the way, because we have our router set up where it's the same depth and everything, we want to make sure that there's nothing in the way up here. So I put a piece of tape here, so when we start taking our tools and getting this to flatten out right now, nothing is sticking up. So a couple things you can do here. Chisels are great. This file from StewMac has no teeth on the side or on the end, which is great. Remember, you can do that with any file and a belt sander, but this one takes a lot of wood off. So I've got a piece of tape up here, and if I'm going at this and I'm starting to hit the top there, you see that? That means that I'm about to get into the neck, and I don't want to do that. This whole thing is going to have to be radiused to match this. I've got a Paracha guitar maker's knife. Believe it or not, they used to make guitars with all of this kind of stuff, the whole guitar this way. And where is Chick Flick Teal Pointer? Just because it's Saturday morning doesn't mean you can slack off. You will be replaced. And I did a whole series on a Bajo Quinto that depended on this, or at least they used one of these to make it. Playlist right up there right about now. Don't blame me for wasting all these years of your life. Anyway, we're going to go down and we're going to make sure that this is all flat before we go the other side. We are going to want to let this dry as long as possible, but basically the next step is we are going to flip this over and end up with one over here. And what do you know? I used the piece of wood here. By the way, this is maple. I got it at Rockler, if they have a Rockler in your area. But this piece that's traced out right there will end up about right there. Okay, guys, before we get going, know that if you slip with the router, the things are going to be disastrous. And these are semi-hollow, but they're not flat. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a motorcycle strap across the body that's padded, and we're just going to do this to the bench. If you live in an earthquake area, you'll get used to this, doing this, but you don't want things to be sliding away. Now, if you get motorcycle straps, we know that guitars are the replacement for a chopper, but it's just temporary. So if you get a few motorcycle straps and it comes time for you to bring a chopper home that's very loud, you can say, hey, I bought it because I already had most of the parts I need for it anyway, starting with the motorcycle strap. Get it? Anyway, make sure that this is stabilized before you start tearing into this part right here. All right, guys. Thank you for the prayers. Now it's just a lot of time on the belt sander, rounding this off, cutting this down where it needs to be and rounding that off, gluing that in, letting it all sit together, rounding these off, and then at some point coming in here where that crack was right there and putting something in. It'll look like a knee brace, but it won't go nowhere. Guys, we are zoomed in here. We have the one side done, and it has been rough, smoothed out. It appears to be okay. I want you to take a look right there. There's a little gap at that curve, and some guy that rhymes with Ed, but it's Fred, has told me, save the curls that come off your chisel, because you can take one of those and press it right down into there. This has got to be tight. There can't be any gaps, and if there is some, there's a great way to take some of your chisel remnants like this and put it in to a place right there like so and pack glue in there. Now this side still has to be leveled out and curved around. You see how that is? That's pretty good. But the trick to this was to put these two together, attach them, and the way to do that is to put a piece over the top, but the truss rod is right there. So we took a fine chisel, and you can see right there the truss rod is just starting to show through, so we're deep enough. Now, when Tammy was working in the shop over here, we would take frets out, and she had this little tool right here that she could put her fingers on, and when we put the frets out that says sandpaper on it, she would sit over there and do this and get things ready for us. By the way, if you're going to pull frets, always score this before you pull them. Anyway, we took a little piece of her tool there and cut this out. Fred thought that this side was the coolest. We've carved this down and it pops right in there. I'm going to glue that up. We're going to clamp it down. We're going to let it dry, and then we'll carve the whole thing. I took my Parachin maker's knife that says, oh, it says Wallachy on there. That must be for a violin or something. I don't know. Maybe if I turn it over, no one will know where I got it. Anyway, I took the back of this and I scored it with this so the glue will stick on there. Now it's just time to glue this up. I'm not using hide glue. We want this to come together, and we'll clamp this down, and then we will carve this. Like I told you before, Cody wants this to be however it turns out. So we'll put a deep French polish on it once we're done. But Ted Woodford, I think you have a winner here with your technique. There we go. Okay, one more time. Parachin guitar maker knife. Scrapers, some of them homemade, some of them not. This little sanding contraption with this little belt works great for cigar box guitar frets or whatever. This file with no teeth on the side or ends from Stumac, a couple pieces of sandpaper, and some good chisels are the way to get this right here put in. Of course, we cut this in with that jig we made and a router. We'll let this dry up for a day or two, and then we'll come in and finish everything up and put a clear finish over the top of it and get it back ready to play. Okay, we got a lot of tools out here, guys, and I have made some significant progress. You want to make sure that when you're working on this now, you kind of keep things right, that you're not putting a lot of pressure on the neck where it doesn't need to be. But my best friends here have been a good chisel, like so, and This bean bag will allow us to rotate the guitar on its side there. You see that? And then I can take this chisel. This isn't the best angle, but I can basically put this side down and then come along and just carefully ride the edge here and get it down to the wood that was the original part of the neck. Sharp chisel, good control, and getting the setup of the angle and everything right. Having different sandpapers. At some point I'm going to need a long piece like this one here, which has backing on the back. You see this? And then I can just set this up in a neck stand and go back and forth and get the radius right. But putting tape on here in the right spots as an indicator of where you're getting down to when you're filing like this here. When you're hitting the tape, you're getting close. Doing the edges and this little spot right here. It's just a use of scrapers and violin makers' knives and whatever it takes to get it nice and smooth. But there's no exact science to this now. Once you get enough stuff in there, and you can tell, I can flex it and twist it, and it's going to be okay. I'm going to be sanding over here for a while. This is very rewarding. Alright guys, this is a good place to end this. I actually thought that this guitar was garbage. I was going to put air plants in it and hang it up. But I am so happy that it is going to go back out and play music, and that Cody Harrell is going to keep Tammy's story going. He does a good job of that already. But thanks goes to Ted Woodford up in Canada. He's been doing this stuff for 25 years, and when you see him working and doing this kind of magic on very expensive guitars, I am so happy that he's willing to share his knowledge and expertise with the rest of us. And the good part about him is whatever's happening has happened. He'll discuss challenges as they happen, and consummate expert. So thanks, Ted. Yeah, guys, I am going to show this to you again when I get footage of it being played. Thanks for watching. Give me a like and a subscribe if you have not. I've got some more fine junk piling to do here.